You saw the rapid decline of production in the industry in Jamaica following privatization. So we should learn that privatization is not a panacea for development and growth. And that despite the amount of money that was pumped into the industry, the emphasis was obviously not in the right place. We'll take a few questions, but we'll move swiftly on to the next presenter, and that is Mr. Vishnu Pandey. I introduced him earlier. He was an agriculturalist by profession. He was the estate manager of Skeldon Estate when that estate was being put on trial run. After many failures, he was sent there, and he will obviously tell you his story, plus give you some of his prescription for the industry. Mr. Pandey has had long years of association with the sugar industry, rising from the rank of a field supervisor to that of estate manager, and he recently represented the union's interests on the board of GAISUCO. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you and to hand you over to Mr. Vishnu Pandey.
Members of Parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues stretching from Wales and the West Bank, Iflat, and the east of Essequibo to Skeldon and the Quarantine. It's a pleasure to be associated with you this evening. The subject matter, agriculture, especially when we look at sugar and when we look at the state or situation of which we're in. To present this to you in a few minutes is a tall order. And I recognize also that perhaps not so much for the foreigners, Mr. Chairman, but for Guyanese, it's not a simple task after lunch. Given the long hours that Guyanese work, and they require that siesta after lunch to really make a presentation. But I trust that we can do it together, and I'll try to be as short as possible, while I'll make that attempt for us to establish a common understanding on that of agriculture and sugar. I recognize the depth of this discussion, so what I've done is to prepare a document of two of the main aspects of agriculture relative to sugar. And one is called the sugarcane plant. So whether we're in Guyana or we're in any other part of the world, the botany remains the same. And the other is called soils of Guyana. This may vary from country to country because we know in our country the science teaches us about montmorillonite, illite, and kaolinite most of all, while in so many other parts of the world we may have had the majority of illite and kaolinite. But the principles and the science of the soil remains the same, and I consider these two important components to put to you this afternoon. I've just prepared 25 copies of this. So Aslim would be the best person to distribute. And I didn't prepare more because we know that paper takes so much, and I think the opportunity will present itself also in our diversification plan to use the cane husk, what we call the rind or the cane plant, to produce more papers. So by the next conference, I'll have an adequate amount of copies to share with you. So that's part of the diversification process, made simple. So this afternoon, I want to look at a few matters of this that we will discuss. One is the GAISUCO, its contribution in Guyana. Since we are talking about sugar, a commodity, and we are speaking about the EU price reduction and world market price and what's happening around the world, I think we may perhaps hint or have a little view as to what is happening globally in recent years. I think it's important also we look at our own Guyana sugar industry in terms of production. And I've decided to give you 4 decades Um, then the problem that faces Gaisuku at the moment, and some possible solutions and strategy so that we can save the industry. And you notice I haven't had anything there about diversification and privatization. And even when we discuss, I don't think that I will reach with diversification and privatization to a large extent. So these will be the issues that we will discuss, and I'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. When we look at the next slide in terms of our contribution, Gaisuku's contribution to Guyana, it is well established that it has been a significant foreign exchange order. Obviously, and it's well known by now, the largest foreign exchange order in the history of our country. It has been known and is still known by so many quarters around the Caribbean and beyond its shores that it's the largest employer in this country. In fact, while the sugar industry has been over 300 plus years, if we were to take just 1 century ago, we had 168 sugar estates in Guyana. 168 sugar estates in Guyana. Of importance, these estates were in all 3 counties of Guyana, in Berbice, in Demerara, and in Essequibo. The reason for making that point, it is to show that the foundation of our economic zone and economic wheel, the kind of infrastructural development, the kind of societal development, and other economic development were all hinged around the sugar industry throughout the 3 counties of Guyana. So here, like in my palm, we had a sugar estate in the center. Around that estate was a housing scheme, schools, hospitals, national insurance scheme, recreational sports facility, market, the business community. Everything revolved around an estate from Essequibo right down to the Quarantine. So when we're going to disrupt in terms of closure, it is not merely from an economic viewpoint that we're looking about cost of production. I think that's a simplistic way to perhaps look at the industry. But we have to look at the larger aspect. What is the infrastructural destruction when we think of people and we think of real development in a country? Where do we restart again? How do we restart? And in that process, did we allow haste to dominate deliberations? These are pertinent questions when we look at the largest employer historically in our country. In addition to being foreign exchange order largest employer, Guyana Sugar Corporation services approximately 18,000 families, about 300 local businesses, contractors, and other entities that by and large depend on Gaisuku. And this spread is from the east of Essequibo, which is Ifat, going right through to Quarantine, and that is Skeldon. So we can simply see the dependence of this important organization that is called the Guyana Sugar Corporation. But in addition to these contributions, there are other things of equal importance, very tangible and very significant also. And the next slide shows the educational and physical development of the various communities that stretch from Essequibo, East Essequibo, which is now Ifat, right up to the Quarantine. And these include the development of skills of our labor force. Educationally, for decades we have been sending our employees to the Guyana School of Agriculture, to University of Guyana, to the renowned Port Moran Training Center, and I think over the last 2 decades, we have had people going abroad in England and various parts of the world. I myself was a recipient of going to Mauritius through the Guyana Sugar Corporation to look at sugarcane agronomy way back in 2002. These recreational and sports facilities we find that in every estate, there were community centers. And the Guyana Sugar Corporation had the best of coaches, whether it's cricket or for the female rounders or whatever it is, throughout the length and breadth of Gaisuku. It generated competitiveness among estates, and we all know the importance of sports in developing healthy minds and healthy bodies and sound minds. We know the importance of sports universally. And Gaisuku spent an average of $230 million in these community centers. These are tangible and significant contribution of the sugar industry. And these are things of which we must focus on. $275 million a year on training and development for those things I've mentioned of GSA, PMTC, University of Guyana, and beyond the shores of Guyana also. In addition to this educational and physical development, the next slide tells us of further benefits. Provides healthcare for approximately 18,000 employees, which was enrolled prior to the closure. Their dependents, and at the time of this census, we had about 5,000 pensioners, and obviously their families too. In pursuance of this fulfillment, we had about 51 medical staff and about 54 auxiliary staff at the various health centers throughout the length and breadth of this country, where every estate was found. And in pursuance of this objective, the health benefits, Gaisuku spent approximately 300 million Ghana dollars per year on healthcare services. In addition to the health benefits, the next slide shows us about rural development, drainage and irrigation for outlying areas. Gaisuku has about 55 drainage pumps across the industry, and I think the capacity hovers about over 11,000 tons per minute discharge into the ocean. And when we speak of a land which is below sea level, we can understand the importance of having these 55 drainage pumps right across the industry. And in addition, to supplement, there were always about 48 drainage sluices. These were by tidal arrangements, 48 drainage sluices right across the industry. So we can see the drainage infrastructure, how important and what role this aspect also played within the entire country. Approximately $1.7 billion were spent annually to maintain the DNI, which is the drainage and irrigation system. And almost 60%, I think this is of vital importance, of this benefit was realized by communities, not necessarily where the sugar workers lived, not necessarily those who were employed in the sugar estate. And I think these are tangible benefits, what we call national benefits, national contribution that such a majestic organization made for centuries. Having said that, therefore, let's look at what's happening globally. Because we hear often that one of the reasons why we have to close a state, it is because we cannot compete with other sugar industries around the world. We heard about the European Union crisis, we heard about market prices, and so many other things. But let me say to you that the price of sugar over the past 40, 50, 60 years, those of you who perhaps know about the sugar industry and whom have done your research, there is always a fluctuating trend. At one time it was called King Sugar. We heard that name. I haven't heard of a bag of sugar. So it remains sugar which is viable. And so we've had so many issues that we can deal with. But let's look at this. There's a growing evidence that world production has declined. World production, not only Gaisuku, but world production has declined. And in the year 2015 to 2017, as much as 15 million tons. That's significant. And this could result in a world sugar deficit of about 10 million tons. So while production is likely to recover, and this was a forecast in 2016 onward, which says that while production is likely to recover somewhat in the year 16, 17, this will still not be enough to cushion the impact of the market deficit. Let's see what the next slide says. It says that this sugar production and forecasting, and I borrowed some of these statements here from F.O. Leach, which I think is known to most of you as one of the most reputable organizations with forecasts of sugar around the world. It is from United Kingdom and various other centers in major parts of the world, United States, etc. And in this forecast, there were about 5 lean years. And what they said, it seems as if the sugar producers can look forward to a longer period of higher prices. I think in any strategic planning, when we speak about the negative effect of the world on world prices, we must also embrace what the experts of the world are saying in their forecasts. And that will aid the process in our deliberations. It will make it much more expansive and much more solid in order to arrive at what maybe the legal terminology, the lawyer says, ratio decidendi. And in English it means you take every single thing into summary before you make a decision. That's what the legal expert says. You don't take 3, 4, 5, 6, what's happening outside, poor prices, etc., etc. But the decidendi meaning a summary of every single factor before you arrive at the decision to implement your strategic plan, and indeed for the plan to start take its firm action. So we can see the loss in terms of value, and we can also see from the forecast that this sweetener, which is cane sugar, has made an impressive comeback from the years that I've spoken of earlier, and it is now trading at the highest level in the past 4 years. We heard about $200 and $300 US, and the forecast was saying that the prices indeed will be up. And if you look at the chart in the next slide, what it shows us, it tells us here that about 140 million tons, which is the world production. And if you look at sugar consumption in the world, the forecast also says that by the year 2020-2022, the demand will be approximately 191 to 195,000 million tons rather. So while the world production stands at about 140 million tons, in about 5 years to come, maximum, the demand will be close to about 195 million tons. So right away we see that this product that is called sugar is not a product that is diminishing or dwindling or will no longer be important in the world market, or will no longer be important relative to consumption, be it confectionery, be it human, be it other businesses. The demand is growing. And because of this, therefore, it's a requirement, it's an essential to factor in any deliberations we have relative to the survival and sustainability of sugar estates. This 140 million tons, we can see the big players, Brazil, India, EU, China, Thailand, etc., etc. And where we have here others, about 35 million tons. A little note here, it's in Africa, Mauritius, Fiji, the Caribbean, etc. These various countries will contribute the 35 million tons. So Guyana, we have, I would refer to it as a wonderful opportunity, given the scaling down of production in the Caribbean. Jamaica, Clifton made mention of the scaling down of production. We know Trinidad is out. We know Barbados is just a handful of sugar. St. Kitts, Nevis, they were all out. And with a growing population in CARICOM, in the Caribbean, we have an opportunity, which is another important factor in our deliberations on sustainability or survival. So it is important that we understand very clearly what is happening around the world and where do we stand at this point in time. And I choose this deliberately because we export our sugar. That's how we make our money, generally. That's how we want to have large sums of cash so that we can get on with the business. And the next slide tells us, of course, that when we speak of the improved economic environment and the probable implementation of business-friendly policies and high production, improved profitability, and so forth, I don't think this scenario can be said of Guyana, because we have gone to the lowest level of production. So in order for us to increase production and increase profitability, we have to sit down again and look at our strategies, our strategic planning, and what do we do. And to get this done, we need the involvement, perhaps sessions of which we have today. But this speaks for itself. So the next slide says, all in all, one can safely say that the cane sugar, there is still a place for cane sugar, because it's reasonable to conclude from the forecasters that beet growing will become less attractive than it used to be. And I think the medical experts will want to confirm this, because the medical journal in 2017 spoke about the increased benefit of the cane sugar, and that they are working in laboratories to come up with scientific affirmations of the less benefit and some effect. I don't want to say harmful, but perhaps a negative effect of the beet sugar. So cane sugar still stands supreme, and cane sugar happens to be so wide in its range of uses: pharmaceuticals, human consumption, and so many other things around the world. So we have a chance, given climate change, what is happening with beet sugar in various parts of the world is taking a lick at this time. Cane sugar still stands very strong. The next slide, I decided to show the past 4 decades. In red here are the years in which we have touched the over 300,000 ton mark. And this is from 1976, in the nationalization period, to 1985. In that decade, on 4 occasions, we have surpassed the 300,000 tons mark. I mentioned this 300,000 tons mark deliberately because at this stage, if you work out the economics, if you work out the finances, should Gaisuku move to produce 300,000 tons of sugar, this will generate, at even current market price, close to 25 billion Guyana dollar. And if Gaisuku is saying that their annual expenditure hovers around 30 to 32 billion Guyana dollar, then with raw sugar we will be making a profit. If you move to value-added product, and we can add a small percentage, 15 to 20% more with value-added product, then obviously we're talking about 20% more in terms of profitability. And then once we can move with the science that the world really gives us in terms of, we will touch on that when we move to the way forward, what we can do to save Gaisuku, and what the science offers in agriculture and agronomy in terms of higher pole, which means higher sugar in the vascular bundles of the cane, and higher fiber that can have cogeneration being a reality. And that's the way the world is moving in terms of its science in agriculture. And then we look at the next slide, from 1986 now to 1995. There is no year we can see that 300,000 ton mark. So we can look at the fluctuating trend. Not one year in that decade we could have seen the 300,000 ton mark. And then we know what happened during that period. Now when you ask for answers, you hear that the rainfall regime was high. But that is not so. When you go back to the first 10-year period and you look at the rainfall, the pattern has not been significantly different. In fact, I guess most of you know that the cane plant requires about 60 inches of rainfall at even distribution on an annual basis. 60 inches of rainfall. So we're talking what, close to 1,500 millimeters of rain. And that's what a plant really requires. Given the drainage system that we have, we can get rid of the water in excess of the 1,500 millimeters. And we know that's Guyana's problem. We are blessed in that we don't have a problem to find water for a sugarcane plant like in all other parts of the world, or many other parts of the world. We are blessed that we have an abundance of water. And since the plant can be deemed as a semi-aquatic plant that requires 60 inches of rainfall minimum on an annual basis, we have an abundance freshwater supply. So rainfall is a blessing for us. Sometimes we use that as a pretext not to avail certain actions, maybe disciplinary actions. But it's a blessing all the while. So the rainfall has been somewhat consistent, but the production is low. And if you look at the acreage under cultivation, it has really remained the same. So there are a couple things here to look at. Once your land mass remains the same and your production drops, then your CPU, your cost per unit will increase. That's the big issue, and that's the big question we have today in Gaisiku. So we're simply saying that, look, the cost per unit is high, so we have to close. That is not a statement in absolute truth, because there are correctables, there are things that we can do to look at how do we correct what has happened, what has really gone wrong. And then we look at the next 10 years, which is 1996 to 2005. We saw some improvement. Some other speakers spoke about training and development and having participation, etc. Then we saw a few years here that we have surpassed the 300,000 ton mark. And especially the years 1999, 2002, 2003, 2004. You know, I'll tell you something which is very interesting. How many of us know that in this year, 2004, that Enmore Estate, the estate which was just closed, produced sugar at 10 US cents per pound. We were equal to Brazil and to Australia, two of the world giants in terms of cost per pound. Enmore Estate produced sugar. How many of us know that Enmore Estate utilized what we call 9.5 tons of cane to a ton of sugar in the year 2004 and to some extent in 2002. These facts shows that we can do something. There is something that we have done correct and something that we have lost. And what we have lost, we seem not to get back to. But instead we seem to hold on that, well, EU prices, world prices drop, cost per unit is high, etc., etc. But we fail to go through perhaps the analysis as to look in depth as to what happened. I think I said earlier, it appears that haste dominated deliberations, resulting in those type of conclusions. And the next slide shows, therefore, having made mention of the years, 3 decades, we look at the last one, 2006 to 2015, we gone back again. Not a single year that we have had 300,000 tons of sugar. And it is in this time here that the big discussion began about the survival of the Guyana sugar industry. I think if you look at the numbers, and again I say, you look at the hectares, they have all been consistent from 1976. But the production was the significant variance. And once your land to maintain at a cost remains, and your production ends up low, then your CPU will be skyrocketing. You'll be making sugar at 32 US cents a pound, when we're having a market price of 18 US cents a pound. That's where we need to focus as to why it is happening. And I think I said, and permit me to repeat it, if we can go back to the 300,000 ton mark, then we'll be above water. Rainfall pattern, some of the years are missing, but the rainfall pattern remains the same as to what it was from 1976 to 2015. The next slide shows about the problems that are facing agriculture. Low production, and I think the decades have shown us, low production of cane and sugar yields. That resulted in a high CPU or cost per pound. Major problem again, drainage. We have had perhaps over the past decade and a half, we have had new highways from Quarantine right down to Essequibo. We have had large amount of squatting. I think Dr. Gopal, you had a major task while you were chairman in Gaisuku to conduct an audit as to what is taking place across the industry with squatting. We have drainage impediments, and we know that if our drainage is, the efficiency is reduced, it will have a telling effect on the cane plant. All the culverts we have on the highways along our roadways, and with rapid siltation and the inability to have machines to go through some of these front facades and drainage trenches would have been a problem. But these are things that can be corrected. I think one of the big ones was the management and workers' relationship. One speaker earlier spoke about the top-down type of relationship. I think Guyana's culture, given the people who came in our industry as slaves and indentured laborers, these are people who were always willing to give up their best to get the better and best results. And because of that, they were always people that you could have spoken to. They require a win-win situation. They will always turn their hands to major tasks. Hence the relationship between management and workers. This has also been a contributory factor when we speak of the problems facing the sugar industry inter alia. What do we need to do to correct these things? I think the next slide shows us that in order to get some of these things corrected, the solutions and strategies for survival and sustenance. I think the term back to basics is well known for as long as you and me have been in this world. But I have added a term here, brilliant at the basics. Because we have gone back to basics and we failed. But to be brilliant, it's an emphatic term to guarantee that there should be no failure. So we need to be brilliant at the basics. And if we are to adopt that, then we will follow same to improve our yields. All the agronomic practices, all the scientific requirements, we will so apply. We will look at the estates that are moving rapidly and we will transfer the best practices. These are all the strategies of which we need to use. We will look at pilot projects in each estate. You have thousands of acres of land per location. Take out maybe 100 acres in every location. Give it the best shot to do everything 100% in terms of precision. We call them a pilot project area. Show the people in the estate that you can produce cane at its maximum. I think with Guyana soil, we are looking at an average of between 85 to 89 tons cane per hectare. That's an average. Plant canes, you're looking at about 110, 100 and 110 tons per hectare. And by the time you reach a 4th and 5th platoon, you can average off at 80, 85 tons. If you are there, then your sugar production automatically will be over 350,000 tons of sugar. That's far above water. So each location, in order for us to find solutions and strategies, we need to go back to pilot projects. In the years 1960 onward, Booker McConnell and the Booker Sugar Estates, every location had what you call a pilot project. And some of the results may be unbelievable at this time. I recall a place called Ecclespool at Wales, 136 tons cane per hectare because of the pilot project. And so it's time for us now to go and transfer what was done there to all the other sections within the cultivation. Another strategy is to look at mechanization. And when we speak of mechanization, this is not suggesting that we would do away with our workforce and replace them by machines. But by attrition, we can so complement. I think Dr. Gopal, you recall when you had bell loaders implemented in the estate. And we say, look, the bell is going to take up the slack for when there is absenteeism, especially on weekends and beginning of the week. So we need to embrace mechanization. That's the way of the world today. We have to recognize the importance of technology. And we have to also fast track that in the industry, because mechanization will allow for a lower cost of production. It will reduce our crop weeks. When we hear about rainfall, you can't reap canes and what have you, we budget in this industry about 32 weeks per year to harvest canes. But if you have mechanized operation, you can finish the harvesting in about 24 weeks. So that 8 weeks or 2 months is the real rainy season where you lose significantly. 30, 40, 50% of your crop and production you lose in the heavy rainy period. So you can reduce your crop weeks and boost your production. And by mechanization, you can also increase your productivity. I wonder how many of us know that Elmore Estate, the one which was closed the other day, that 85% of that estate field lend itself to fully mechanized operation. 85% of that estate's cultivation. And you want to hear this? Last year, 40% of the canes on the mechanized layout were left on the ground. Sorry, 40,000 tons of canes on the mechanized layout were left on the ground when all the machines to harvest canes were parked at Skelder. But I think it's reasonable for you to draw a conclusion. Is it the rainfall? Is it the layout bad? What is it happening? You have machine to harvest canes on friendly layout parked, and 40,000 tons, which would have given us a minimum of $500 million at least, $500 million. The guys at Wales could have been happy by this time, maybe we were happier. And the same with Skelder. Far over 85% of that cultivation is fully mechanized. So the mechanization process commenced in Gaisuku perhaps over a decade ago it started. And it bothers and creates some sort of confusion in the minds of thinkers that if these are strategies and solutions to increase production and lower your costs, then the only 2 estates that are nearly fully mechanized were closed. And then we keep saying that the ones which are labor intensified and difficult to be sustained, most of them are still existing. In fact, we look at Iflit in particular. The next slide tells us, therefore, to find solutions for its survival and sustenance, there must be adherence to policy. Now imagine from 2011 to 2014, Gaisuku harvested over 41% of its cane, which were young. Now the schoolboy who does basic agriculture science in school will tell you that if you're going to reap canes that are not matured, a number of things could happen. You have to get foreign exchange in terms of fertilizer to fertilize twice in 1 year. The plant will automatically lose about 30 to 40% of its potential in yields. Your tons cane, ton sugar ratio will significantly increase. Your ton sugar production will dramatically fall. And the biggest monster, your CPU will be skyrocketing. So when we speak about the adherence to policy, then timing and sequence, fertilizers, harvesting periods, planting periods, these are things we need to embrace. And then we spoke of value added in terms of getting further. As I'm winding up, the next slide says that we need to look at research also and development. In Guyana, we take about between 10 to 15 years to produce a cane variety, because we do it by fuzzing and polycrossing in the science. And you go to countries, perhaps you take Australia or even Mauritius. 20 years ago, they were doing tissue culture where in 6 months you can produce a variety. And we are here over 300 years, and it takes us still 10 to 15 years to produce a variety. So the guys who, when you look at the name HJ5741, that variety was bred in Holland and Jamaica. If you look at B51131, it was Barbados for B, 51131. If you look at DB, it's Demerara but Barbados. Very rare we would have had the best variety that is called Demerara alone. because it takes us nearly over a decade to really produce a variety. And the variety we want to produce must be the kind of variety in research and development that will give us high pole, meaning a lot of sugar in the cane, must give us high fiber so that we can have cogeneration that we heard about in terms of diversification. In research, we need to look at our weeds, which can rob yields as much as 40%, pest diseases, monitoring of each estate in terms of their pilot projects and their laboratories and their what we call the nurseries, primary, secondary, commercial nurseries. And to conclude, we speak of the industrial relations climate and industrial relations aspect. There must be a gallant effort to minimize work stoppage. There must be an effort to have workers' involvement in the sugar industry. And by involvement, I really mean, you know, as a young boy, I began my career at Wales, and it was on the 24th of July, 1971. And I recall as a young man from high school, going into the planting yard. That was a nightmare for me because I never knew how to position the kid up, at what angle to do it, and what have you. And there was a man, I remember the name, they call him Plank. So he seemed to like me, I called him aside and said, Uncle, I want you to teach me this thing, man. He said, you don't worry, man. I can tell you all them scamp man what I'm going to do here, and they correct me to do it. And let me tell you something, I have learned the best of the planting method from the worker. From the worker. And even when I became general manager in Gaisuku, I learned the best about the factory and factory operations from the man down at the boiler, from the man at the evaporator, from the man at the centrifugal, from the man at the scale, from the man who does the sugar curing and boiling. These are the people you need to go to. So we need to get out from the ivory tower and to improve the industrial relations by minimizing stoppages, be involved with the workers. Nobody's going to really deny you of whom you are. Your status is always intact. But you'll be better and be more loved, be adored, and be respected if you can really be with these people to get the common objective, and that is to improve the industry. And I speak of the improved communications for common goal. We need to establish common understanding in persons for our goal. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'm saying to you that business today, not only in Guyana, but in the world, business faces daunting challenges. Competition is increasing, and it's very hostile. The operating environment of which we know is increasingly complex. And because of these aspects mentioned, it is of vital and critical importance that our planning is ever so needed at this juncture of the industry. And we need to turn our plans into actions very fast. Paper plans that are failed to be put into action are no plans at all. A paper plan must be put into action. I remember once that we had about, hey, don't laugh about this, we had about 100 years planning paper document in Gaisuku without implementing one of them properly. Strategic plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. Every time you turn around, plan and plan and plan. Every time you get a new chairman, the strategic plan. Every time you get a new sector director, planning. Every time you get a new general manager, planning. But what we need to do is to turn our plan into action very fast, because that is critical for success. Technological advancement and human resource are of vital importance too. Even the rockets that we see in the world today came from the human resource. And I want to say to you today that regardless where we want to go, whatever we want to achieve, no matter how brilliant minds we may have academically, no matter what MBAs and masters and PhDs and whatever we possess, I want to humbly say to you that when good people become scarce, the best system dwindles. It's imperative, therefore, that we focus on the world's most important asset, which is people. Because you can have all the best plans, You can have all the technological input, you can have all the sophistry, you can have all the brilliant minds. If the good people become scarce, all the best plans and every single thing dwindles. Could it be that we are where we are because we are in scarcity of good people and our system dwindles? Thank you very much.